Look, I think as the Fed chairman said yesterday or the day before, this economy is wholly dependent on getting rid of the COVID virus from the population, getting vaccinations in people's arms, getting people more confident that they can go out and engage in economic activity. And until that happens, you're going to see a slowdown. We had obviously a resurgence. We've never been very good at, unfortunately, coping with the virus to begin with, but we had a resurgence in the fourth quarter due to the Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve holidays and people getting together. So it's really no surprise. I think it was predicted, unfortunately, that there'd be a resurgence, and that's obviously going to affect economic activity. And
Right.
if shops and restaurants have to close down, then you're going to see that reflected in GDP numbers.
And we certainly did see Fed Chair Powell there saying that essentially the Fed's hands are tied at the moment because of the pandemic and the aftermath when it comes to spurring the economy. So then who or what should we be looking at policy-wise to really best support the economy in 2021?
Get the shots in people's arms, get the vaccines, get the vaccine from the federal government to the states and to the hospitals and to the distribution centers, to the pharmacies around the country. Get people vaccinated. It's as simple as that.
And so then we've obviously talked about fourth quarter GDP, but what about the rest of 2020? How does that compare to what we might be seeing in 2021?
Well, 2020 turned out to be a real anomaly, economically. After the extent of the pandemic was made clear to the markets in March, and the markets tanked, and then the Fed stepped in at the end of March and again in the beginning of April to rescue the financial markets. That created a huge discrepancy between winners and losers. Anybody who could access the capital markets turned out to be a pretty big winner in 2020, and 90% of the country that could not, and businesses that could not access the capital markets really struggled and really suffered, especially when the stimulus package that was passed in April ran out, and until the new one was passed at the end of the year. And of course, we're now awaiting another stimulus package. I think a lot of the benefit that occurred in 2020 is actually going to come, you're going to have to pay the piper in 2021.
So then which parts of the economy seem to be suffering the most at this point, and what sort of relief is still needed?
Small and medium-sized businesses that can't access the capital markets, that many banks don't want to do business with, are obviously suffering. Restaurants, retail, people, businesses dependent upon people going into stores and facilities. I mean, they've been decimated. That doesn't mean they won't come back once people are vaccinated and feel like they can go out and be about. I think if you look back 100 years ago during the flu pandemic back then, there's a reason that people call the Roaring '20s the Roaring '20s, because once World War I was over and the pandemic was more or less resolved, although at a heavy toll, people had a lot of pent-up demand, and I think you're going to see the same thing again this year and in the next few years, if and when this pandemic gets in the rearview mirror, if that's even possible at this point. But obviously, the first step is vaccination.
So then as we do look ahead at potential bright spots, what trends are you keeping an eye on that are really supporting or providing more growth?
Look, I think a number of trends, especially in digital communication, were moved forward many years because of this pandemic, and I don't think I think that those kinds of changes are here to stay. I mean, I mean, it's almost inconceivable to imagine what would have happened to the American economy without the internet, because huge swaths of the population, not all obviously, were able to continue to do their jobs remotely and digitally, and that would have been inconceivable before the internet. So if this had all happened, say, in 1990 or 2000 instead of 2020, I think the damage to the economy would have been much, much more severe. So we're very fortunate in a sense that the internet was here and that many parts of the economy could continue to do business over the internet, and that's provided a huge boon that otherwise wouldn't have been there.